Sony has revealed the futuristic controllers for VR on PS5. Let's take a look at the details. Almost a month ago, Sony surprised everyone by confirming that PSVR 2 is coming. And Sony has surprised everybody again with revealing details of the new controllers that will be available for the PSVR system. In a post on the PlayStation blog, Hideaki Nishino, who is the Senior Vice President of Platform Planning and Management, he explained 3 things about the controller: the objective for creating it, its functions, and the design. He said that it was designed from the ground up with a goal of making a huge leap from current gen VR gaming. And from what's been revealed so far, it's definitely a step ahead from anything that's out there on the market at the moment. Our new VR controller speaks to our mission of achieving a much deeper sense of presence and a stronger feeling of immersion in VR experiences. So VR is all about the immersion, feeling that you are somewhere else in a different place from where you are currently. And also the deeper sense of presence so that you feel more active in that place. And so Sony are trying to do this by giving you more interactivity with the world through the new controller. Okay, so let's have a look at the controller functions. There are actually 2 controllers, the left and the right, and they are roughly a mirror image of each other. These 2 controllers are described as having an orb shape. These orb controllers will be used in some of the technology that's currently available in the DualSense controller that was released with the PS5. They will have adaptive triggers. Both the left and right one will have a trigger button, and if you haven't used it before, what you'll find is that it adds an extra layer of tension which can be controlled by the developers. So if you are, for example, drawing a bowl, you can feel that tension, or if you're pulling a gun's trigger and it has a hard trigger, you can feel that as well. And it was excellently used in Astro's Playroom, which was included with the PS5. And you've also got that haptic feedback. So the haptic feedback is an advanced version of Rumble. It allows you to feel different sensations of vibrations, some subtle, some more intense, and some in different areas of the controller. And both the adaptive triggers and haptic feedback used in VR, that's likely to have a tremendous effect on magnifying all those sensations. So for example, say you have a door to pull and it's a stiff door and you're pulling on it and you're pulling the trigger. That tension on the triggers will definitely help you feel more immersed in that world when you're seeing it in real life effectively. There will also be finger touch detection, which Sony says can detect your fingers without pressing in the areas where you place your thumb, index or middle fingers. So the exact technology being used for it hasn't been made clear, but it could be really useful. For example, you have your fingers off the buttons, but you are pointing at something, and this may be seen in an RPG with a character seeing where you're pointing at, or some other signal, or thumbs up signal. But we have to wait until Sony reveals more, until we know what it can do and what its limitations are. And all in all, the adaptive triggers, the haptic feedback, and the possibility to make gestures with your hand and your fingers will all hopefully increase that sense of immersion that you are in the world, that you can interact with it properly and fully. So if we look at the left controller, you can see it's got a thumbstick, it's got a triangle, square button, PlayStation button, and the share create button. And the right controller is almost the same, but it's got the circle and the cross button, and also the options button. And what's really interesting about this is that unlike previous controllers, like with the Move and its navigation controller that you could buy with it, or with the Wii controller and the nunchuck attachment, these are both exactly the same, and together they give you the full set of PlayStation buttons that are available in the DualSense. And why is this important? This is really important because it means that any game that is available, a standard game, can easily be converted to run in VR, and you won't be missing out on any of the core buttons. And I don't know if any of you had a PS4 and PS Vita. The Vita only had 1 set of triggers, whereas the PS4 DualSense 4 has 2 left 1, left 2, right 1, right 2 buttons. And because the Vita had a couple of the buttons missing, it made converting any PS4 games for it a bit difficult because you were effectively missing some buttons. But why this is so good for PS5 and PSVR 2 is that it means that any sort of game can hopefully be easily converted to run in VR. And we've seen this with games like No Man's Sky. You can use the same version of the game to play the standard version and the VR version, and that is so good because you only need 1 saved game file, and no matter how much you love VR, sometimes you just may want to play without the headset on. Having this option, having all these buttons, it's going to mean that developers are going to feel more comfortable and more likely to release their games with a VR option. Having the two symmetrical controllers also means that if there are VR games that don't require too many buttons being pressed, if you are left-handed, I'm sure it would be possible to switch all the controllers to the left controller, the left orb. Now, Sony is focusing on ergonomics. It's said that it's very important to it. And ergonomics is making the controllers as comfortable as possible to hold, especially as you are going to be using a variety of controls and you need to be comfortable holding it for a long period of time. So what Sony has done is they've conducted a variety of tests, a variety of research on all sorts of hand sizes. And they've used data and research that they've gained from the study of PlayStation controllers, the standard ones, the DualShocks, the DualSense, all of this to try and make a controller that's going to be as comfortable as possible. But what is so interesting about these Orb controllers is that they do seem to be genuinely different, genuinely VR next generation controllers, because the Oculus Quest 2 controllers, they look great and they're fantastic, but it is a variation of a wand controller like the PlayStation Move. And I use the term wand loosely, referring to a stick or a grip that you just hold. And also, if you look at the Valve Index controllers, yes, it does have this advanced finger tracking, but in some ways there is a single stick that you have to hold. Now, these new controllers are going to be a big step up from what's available on PSVR, which is the Move controller. And this is because when the PSVR was released in 2016, new controllers, new custom controllers were not made for it. Instead, what Sony decided to do was just use the Move controllers it had previously created for PlayStation Move on PS3. And these were released in 2010. So these controllers are 11 years old now. In all this time, it's become quite obvious that they've become dated, and so something different has been necessary. So you can imagine that now PlayStation, the researchers, the engineers, they've had all this time to make a bespoke controller for the next generation of PSVR, that they want to put all the bells and whistles, everything that they've ever dreamed of and hoped for is going into these controllers. Now, let's have a look at how they will be to hold. I'm going to bring this image up on screen, and it's very low tech. I'm going to put my hands over to the controller so you can sort of get a visual idea. And you can see my hand would grip the vertical stem there, and the fist of the hand would be in the inside of that circular bit here. And I think it would be, quite comfortable to hold. Now, if we look at the controller from the side, there is the main trigger, and I'm just going to increase the exposure on the image, put a bit more light on it so we can see a bit more detail. And you can see there is the other trigger. So that effectively is like the right 1 button, and that's the right 2. And down here, that's the port for charging the device, probably a USB-C port. Now, in terms of materials, these are renders. They don't look like actual objects, but I suspect these are a relatively low-cost plastic, because Sony's going to have to make these at a very cost-effective price. So the Valve Index controllers, they cost £259 for 2 controllers, which is about $400 in the USA. These controllers for the PSVR 2, they have to be very cost effective, and effectively this means the plastic is going to be quite cheap and possibly breakable. You don't want to be dropping these things on the floor, as much as we can deduce from just looking at these images. Then if we look at the Oculus Quest 2 controllers, they are very high quality. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, we shouldn't expect too much in terms of the build quality at this stage, because Sony's going to have to produce the headset and 2 controllers in one box and keep it as cost effective as possible. Now, what's really good to hear, so the VR controller is tracked by the new VR headset through a tracking ring across the bottom of the controller. Now, I've tried looking at the images and I can't see any sign of it, but what this is likely going to be is infrared LEDs which are inside the controllers, and that can be scanned by the headset. But because it is this bespoke technology, it's fantastic in that you're not likely to get these calibration errors that you do get with the PSVR. So essentially, wherever you're holding your hands, wherever you're holding the controllers, the headset should be able to track exactly where they are. And Sony is going to reveal later how exactly this technology works. So why has Sony decided to release this information now? Well, again, it's to get ahead of the curve and to avoid any leaks. This is because the prototypes, it's getting ready to send them out to developers so that developers can get their hands on them and start using them whilst they're building their initial games there and testing them out. And this is a really good opportunity for them, because it's normally at this early stage that they can give feedback to Sony on what they like about the controllers. It's like an experimental stage in many ways, because Sony, they take this feedback and then they use it in case they do need to make any adjustments if any unforeseen issues come up. And so it's like an alpha stage in many ways for Sony to determine what works and what needs to be refined further. Sony hasn't actually revealed a release date for this, but it's very likely going to be the tail end of 2022. And this is because obviously a company doesn't need to reveal a product too early, because if you have people waiting for too long, that can kill the hype and lead to some frustration. Sony first revealed details of the PS5 in an article with Wired in April 2019, and then it actually released the console in November 2020, which is approximately 16 months, I believe. And the next generation VR for PlayStation was revealed in February of this year, which is 2021. So more than likely it's going to be near the end of 2022, possibly November, maybe even earlier. And Sony have said that there will be more news to come later this year. So why is PSVR 2 so exciting? Well, next generation VR on PlayStation 5 means you'll be able to play these advanced VR games that are currently only available on PC VR. The all-in-one Oculus Quest 2, it's really easy to use, but it cannot run these highly detailed visual games. So the hope is you'll be able to get games like Half-Life Alyx available on PS5 using next generation VR. With an install base of approximately 115 million PS4s, PSVR has been bought by approximately 4 to 5% of that market, and this was the first generation version of it. So if this new version is more attractive, more easy to use, has a greater range of games, and is basically next generation VR, then that could mean that VR will have an even greater market penetration with the PS5 market. So it is all very exciting about what's going to happen with VR. Just the idea of being able to switch from a VR mode to a standard mode and vice versa. I think that's one of the best things that I'm looking forward to. And if there's anything Sony can do to reduce VR sickness, that would just be incredible as well. So, like many of you, I'm really looking forward to this one. Please like, share with anybody you think will be interested, and subscribe for more of this good stuff. Cheers.